with the U.S. firmly in the middle of it. Washington Congressman Adam Smith, ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, joins us now. Good morning to you, Congressman. I want to ask you first about your very latest, your take on what we're hearing about Greenland here. And you heard there in a text to Norway's Prime Minister, the president appears to link his aggressive stance on Greenland to not receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. What's your take?
Well, I want people to pause and appreciate that this is certifiably insane. This is not a foreign policy conversation that we should be having. And clinging to the fact that Greenland is important from a national security perspective, yes, it is. But Denmark controls Greenland. Denmark is part of NATO. We have a treaty with Greenland and Denmark that allows us to have military bases on Greenland. We can do whatever we want to do on Greenland right now. Russia and China, if they invaded, it'd be like they invaded Poland or Germany. It would carry the same risk. Trump is pursuing this because of his ego, not because it has anything to do with U.S. national security interests. And the fact that every single member of Congress, Republican or Democrat, isn't saying this is crazy, stop doing it. It is driving a wedge in our alliance and accomplishing nothing for us. It is troubling. We need to push back on this. This is, as I said, this is a certifiably insane policy that the president is pursuing because of his own ego, not because of U.S. interests.
Speaking of that potential wedge, as you know, he's threatening a 10% import tax on 8 European countries if a deal isn't done on Greenland. What would that mean for the U.S.?
Well, his tariff policies have been a complete disaster, and I take Mike Turner's point, Republican congressman from Ohio, that should be focused more on the economy. But these tariffs are undermining the economy. We have seen a massive decline in manufacturing jobs. The tariffs were supposed to have the opposite effect. At the same time, costs are going up on just about everything: food, housing, healthcare, energy, insurance. The tariffs are not helping. They're pushing us in the wrong direction, and they're smashing the alliance that we have, certainly with Europe, but it's also undermining our partnerships with places like India and Brazil. And again, I want folks to understand, Trump is doing this because he wants to consolidate power in his hands, not for the sake of the people of this country. He wants to use our government to make himself more powerful, whether it's the tariffs, threatening Greenland. He now, of course, says that he's the president of Venezuela, and we're going to go down there and take their oil. It is all about consolidating power in his hands. It is undermining our very representative democracy and also harming us in very real and substantive ways.
Well, I want to speak to Venezuela because, as you just mentioned, the president has now said he's the leader of that country after removing their president. What do you think happens next there?
Well, I think what Trump is going to try to do is he's simply going to try to bully the current government in Venezuela, which, remember, is basically the Maduro government. It's Maduro's vice president who's running it. Trump thinks because he snatched Maduro and has threatened Delcy Rodriguez, who is now the president of Venezuela, that they will do what he wants. And what does Trump want? Trump wants a cut of the oil. Basically, you will note that since Maduro was removed, there have been no strikes against these so-called drug boats down in the Caribbean and the Pacific Ocean. This was supposed to be about stopping narco traffickers. Well, the narco traffickers are still working in Venezuela. Nothing has changed just because Maduro is gone, but we've completely forgotten about that. Trump is trying to turn our constitutional republic into his own personal empire. And I can't believe that this is escaping people's notice. It's time to stand up and say, no, that is not what the United States of America is supposed to be, and that is not in our best interests.
So how concerned are you about putting U.S. military boots on the ground in Venezuela?
I don't think Trump is going to want to do that. Now, if the Rodriguez government doesn't prove as pliable as he is hoping on the oil question, it's certainly a possibility, but I'll say I'm much more concerned right now about President Trump putting U.S. active duty military boots on the ground in Minneapolis, which is another part of his effort to exert power at the expense of the rights of the people of this country and at the expense of the Constitution.
Now, we mentioned you're the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, so I'm curious, is the White House communicating with you and members of the committee about his plans here at home and around the world?
You see, well, that's part of being a dictator instead of being the president of a constitutional republic. Trump doesn't want to work with Congress. He wants to minimize our influence as much as possible to consolidate the power in his hands. And Speaker Mike Johnson, and to some degree, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, have been only too happy to let him do that. So no, he does not communicate with us. He certainly doesn't communicate with the Democrats. But even my Republican colleagues don't get a lot of heads up or a lot of the normal notification that we're supposed to get to do our oversight of the Department of Defense. They are not giving us those notices. They are acting unilaterally and in many cases contrary to the law and the Constitution.
All right, Congressman Adam Smith, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Thanks for the chance.